My name is Denise, and at 37, I never imagined my own daughter would stand in front of a judge and deny everything I had sacrificed for her. For years, I juggled multiple nursing jobs, missed sleep, and pushed through exhaustion, all to give Lily and Jason the life they deserved after their father left. But Greg had other plans. With his new wife and manipulative words, he slowly poisoned my children against me. When Lily screamed those words in court, I thought I had lost everything. Until one photograph changed everything. Before I share how I found the strength to face my daughter's accusations, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to fight for your truth when everyone else believed the lies. The first signs of trouble appeared long before that devastating day in court. 5 years ago, my life looked completely different. I was working as a registered nurse at Memorial Hospital, often pulling double shifts to support our family, while my husband Greg built his business consulting firm. On paper, we were the perfect family, living in a modest but comfortable home in the suburbs with our two children, Lily and Jason. Greg had always been charming. That was what attracted me to him when we met in college. His confidence and easy smile made everyone gravitate toward him. What I didn't recognize until years into our marriage was how that same charm masked a pattern of subtle emotional manipulation. The criticism disguised as concern. The way he would twist my words during arguments until I doubted my own memory. The subtle undermining of my parenting decisions while presenting himself as the fun, easygoing parent. The breaking point came after 11 years of marriage when Greg announced he had met someone else. Tara was 26, worked at his office, and according to him, actually appreciated his ambition. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once Greg found motivation to end our marriage. I was blindsided, devastated, and suddenly a single mother at 32. Our initial custody arrangement gave us shared legal custody with the children primarily living with me while Greg had them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. This made sense since Greg traveled frequently for business, and I had arranged my hospital shifts around the children's school schedules. Despite working longer hours to compensate for the loss of Greg's income, I made it work. I had to. The first year followed a predictable pattern. Greg would miss visits due to business emergencies, then overcompensate with extravagant gifts and fun outings when he did see Lily and Jason. I couldn't compete with trips to amusement parks and the latest electronics. My budget stretched thin, covering the mortgage on my nurse's salary, even with the modest child support Greg provided when he remembered to send it. We eventually had to downsize to a 3-bedroom apartment closer to the hospital. The move meant changing schools for the kids, another disruption in their already unstable lives. I transformed the smallest bedroom into a cozy shared space where they could do homework and play video games. It wasn't the spacious family room they had in our old house, but I hung their artwork on the walls and made sure they had everything they needed. 2 years after the divorce, I met Mark. He was different from Greg in every way that mattered. Quiet, thoughtful, and genuinely kind, Mark taught 5th grade at an elementary school near the hospital. We met when I gave a healthcare presentation to his class. Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately. I was cautious about introducing him to my children, waiting 6 months before having him over for dinner. That first introduction went better than I expected. Jason, who was 11, then immediately bonded with Mark over their shared interest in basketball. Lily, at 13, was more reserved but polite. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that we might find a new normal, a peaceful co-parenting relationship with Greg, and a fresh start with Mark. Everything changed the weekend after Mark first met the kids. Greg suddenly became intensely interested in his parental rights. His previously missed visits became non-negotiable. He began calling the children daily when they were with me, asking leading questions about their time at my apartment, about Mark, about whether I was spending enough time with them. The shift in Lily's attitude happened so gradually that I almost didn't notice at first. The eye rolling that I attributed to normal teenage behavior. The increasing resistance to house rules. The constant comparisons between our apartment and her father's newly purchased 5-bedroom house with a pool where she had her own suite with a bathroom. Jason, always more sensitive and attuned to emotions than his sister, observed Lily's behavior and slowly began following her lead. But occasionally, when Lily wasn't around, he would still curl up next to me on the couch or ask for help with his homework the way he used to. I tried everything to maintain my connection with my increasingly hostile teenagers. I adjusted my work schedule to attend every school event possible, even when it meant functioning on 3 hours of sleep. I set aside one-on-one time with each of them, though these attempts were increasingly met with resistance or indifference. I kept a family calendar on the refrigerator, meticulously tracking their activities, appointments, and achievements. most importantly, I maintained our family photo album. Since the children were babies, I had documented everything. First steps, school plays, sports games, birthdays, ordinary moments that caught my heart. Even after the divorce exhausted from 12-hour shifts, I would take pictures, print them, and add them to our album with handwritten notes about each occasion. It was my way of proving to myself, if no one else, that I was present. I was trying. I was there. What I didn't realize then was how important those photographs would become. The subtle campaign to turn my children against me escalated the summer before Lily started high school. Greg filed his first motion to modify our custody arrangement, claiming I was emotionally unavailable to the children due to my demanding work schedule. The filing came just 2 weeks after he discovered Mark had moved into my apartment. Though the judge maintained our existing arrangement, the legal battle drained my savings and planted seeds of insecurity. The children spent most of that summer at Greg's house with their new stepmother Tara, who had apparently overcome her initial reluctance about instant motherhood. When they returned for my scheduled time, they were distant and critical of everything from the food I prepared to the activities I suggested. By October, I was receiving regular calls from Lily's guidance counselor expressing concern about her declining grades and confrontational attitude with teachers. When I tried to discuss this with Lily, she exploded. "You don't even care about my education," she shouted, slamming her bedroom door. "Dad says you're too busy with your boyfriend to care about us." The words stung because I had just worked 3 consecutive night shifts to afford the graphing calculator she needed for advanced math. I had helped her with algebra homework at 5 in the morning after returning from work. I had emailed her teachers asking for additional resources. But somehow in her mind, I had become the parent who didn't care. Later that night, while Lily was showering, I made a decision I still feel conflicted about. I checked her phone. What I found shattered me. Dozens of text messages from Greg undermining every parenting decision I made. "Remember, if mom says no to the weekend trip with Mackenzie, it's because she doesn't want you to have friends outside her control. Did your mom even notice you've been feeling sick all week? Tara says we should take you to a specialist. Don't worry about the math test. Your mom might think grades matter, but I know you're smart regardless of what some teacher says." Message after message, subtle manipulations planting the idea that I was the obstacle to their happiness. I took screenshots and emailed them to myself before returning the phone, my hands shaking. That night, Mark found me crying in our bathroom, trying to muffle the sound so the children wouldn't hear. "You need to document everything, Denise," he said, his teacher instincts kicking in. "If this is heading where I think it is, you'll need evidence." He was right. I started keeping a detailed journal of every interaction, every missed visit, every undermining comment reported by the children. I saved emails, recorded phone calls when legally permitted, and continued adding to our family photo album with almost desperate determination. Despite my efforts, the distance between my children and me grew. In November, I missed Lily's school presentation on career day due to an emergency at the hospital when 3 victims from a major car accident arrived during my shift. No other trauma nurses were available, and people were literally dying. I had no choice. I called Lily immediately after my shift ended, still wearing scrubs covered in other people's blood, to apologize and ask about her presentation. She hung up on me. What she didn't know was that I was working overtime that month specifically to pay for her class trip to Washington, D.C. in the spring, a trip she had talked about for months. Greg, however, showed up at her presentation. He took her out for ice cream afterward and bought her the expensive boots she'd been wanting. The boots I had told her we would need to save for over several months. By Christmas, Lily was openly hostile. She mimicked Tara's speech patterns, hairstyle, even her dismissive hand gestures. Jason, watching his big sister closely as 14-year-olds often do, began repeating phrases that sounded nothing like him and everything like Greg. "Your mom just doesn't understand the kind of opportunities I want for you kids. She's stuck in her little nursing job while Dad and Tara are actually building something important. Must be nice to have Mom and Mark playing house while we're stuck in this apartment." Each comment was a knife, but I tried to respond with patience and understanding. They were children caught between warring parents. They didn't understand adult complexities. At least that's what I told myself. My friend Sarah, another nurse from the pediatric floor, witnessed some of these interactions when she visited with her son. After one particularly brutal evening where both children ignored me completely, she pulled me aside. "This isn't normal teenage rebellion, Denise," she said firmly. "Greg is coaching them. You need to talk to a lawyer." The next day, I met with Amanda, a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict custody cases. As I shared the screenshots, journal entries, and recorded incidents, her expression grew increasingly concerned. "What you're describing sounds like parental alienation," she explained. "It's a form of emotional abuse where one parent systematically damages the relationship between the children and the other parent. It's notoriously difficult to prove in court, but this documentation is a good start." I left her office with a mixture of validation and dread. There was a name for what was happening to my family, but naming it didn't stop the pain. January marked the beginning of the worst period of my life. Greg officially filed for full custody, claiming I was neglectful and emotionally unavailable to the children. The filing included affidavits from Lily and Jason stating they preferred to live with their father full-time. The words in those documents, allegedly from my children but clearly guided by an adult hand, described me as perpetually absent, disinterested in their activities, and prioritizing my relationship with Mark over their well-being. The formal legal language, interspersed with teenage expressions, created a surreal document that both was and wasn't my children's voice. A week later, I received a devastating letter from the school counselor who had been working with Lily. It outlined concerns about the home environment at my apartment, citing information that could only have come from Greg. The counselor had never contacted me to hear my perspective, despite my regular emails checking on Lily's progress. That same day, while using the shared family iPad to check the children's school portal, I discovered deleted messages in the recently cleared browser history. Greg had been coaching Lily on exactly what to tell the counselor, with specific phrases designed to raise red flags about my parenting while presenting himself as the stable, supportive father. I was losing my children through a carefully orchestrated campaign I couldn't seem to counter. Lily began refusing to spend her required weekends at my apartment, claiming sudden plans or illness. When she did come, she locked herself in her room or picked fights that would justify her calling Greg for an early pickup. Jason, though less overtly hostile, followed his sister's lead. But occasionally I would catch him watching me with a conflicted expression, as if some part of him recognized the manipulation, but couldn't figure out how to break free of it. The situation reached a breaking point at a parent-teacher conference in February. I had requested a specific time to accommodate my work schedule and confirmed with the school. When I arrived, Lily's math teacher looked confused. "We just finished your family's conference 20 minutes ago," she said. "Your ex-husband said you couldn't make it and they were speaking for the family." Greg had deliberately scheduled over my time slot, then lied to the teacher. When I called him later to confront him, Tara answered instead. "The kids are much happier with us," she said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "Maybe you should focus on your career and your boyfriend and leave parenting to people who can prioritize children." I managed to maintain my composure until the call ended, then broke down at work the next day when a patient reminded me of Lily. My supervisor found me crying in the supply closet and immediately pulled me into her office. After hearing a condensed version of my situation, she offered something I desperately needed: flexibility. She adjusted my schedule to give me more weekday afternoons free, even though it meant taking more night shifts and weekend rotations. It was a small mercy in an otherwise merciless situation. That night, Mark suggested something that broke my heart all over again. "Maybe we should take a step back," he said gently. "Not break up, but maybe I should move back to my place for a while. Take away that piece of ammunition from Greg." I knew he was right. Greg's legal filings repeatedly mentioned my live-in boyfriend as a destabilizing presence, but Mark's support was one of the few things keeping me functioning. The thought of facing this battle without his daily presence terrified me. We compromised. Mark kept his apartment but stayed with me when the children were with Greg. When they were scheduled to be with me, he kept his distance, joining us only for occasional casual interactions. It was an uncomfortable arrangement that felt like giving in to Greg's manipulation, but protecting my relationship with my children had to take priority. Despite these adjustments, the situation continued to deteriorate. I worked 3 consecutive double shifts to afford Lily's class trip to Washington, D.C., pushing my body to its limits. When I handed her the permission slip and check, she barely glanced at them. "Dad already paid for it last week," she said dismissively, "and he got me the premium package with the extra tour options." The fact that I had specifically emailed her teacher asking about payment options and had never been informed that it was already handled told me this was another deliberate move to undermine me. Later that week, I overheard Lily on the phone with a friend saying, "My mom doesn't care about my future. She's never there for anything important." I wanted to interrupt to remind her of the nights I'd stayed up helping her with projects, the weekends spent visiting college campuses, the educational savings account I contributed to each month despite financial strain. But experience had taught me that confronting her would only push her further away. With the court date approaching, I made one last attempt to connect with my children. I prepared their favorite meals, bought tickets to a concert Lily had mentioned wanting to attend, and asked Jason if he'd like to go to a basketball game. Both refused, claiming they had plans with friends. Later, I saw on social media that they had spent that weekend with Greg and Tara at an amusement park. The night before our court appearance, I sat alone in my apartment reviewing the evidence Amanda and I had prepared. Financial records showing my consistent support despite Greg's erratic child support payments. Documentation of every school event, doctor's appointment, and activity I had attended despite my work schedule. Text messages and emails revealing Greg's manipulation. And photographs. So many photographs that told a different story than the one my children now believed. Among them was the most important one taken at Lily's 14th birthday. I had just finished a 16-hour shift covering for a colleague. I was still in my scrubs, dark circles under my eyes, but I was there carrying the homemade strawberry cake with cream cheese frosting that Lily had requested every year since she was 6. The photo captured the moment perfectly, my exhaustion and my love existing simultaneously. My mother had taken it, and later told me it was the most honest picture of parenthood she'd ever seen. I hoped it would be enough. The family court building was cold and sterile, all beige walls and uncomfortable wooden benches. I arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a conservative navy blue dress I had purchased specifically for this appearance, my evidence organized in a leather portfolio Amanda had provided. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Greg arrived 5 minutes before our scheduled time, flanked by his expensive attorney in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Tara walked slightly behind them, her hand possessively on Jason's shoulder, her other arm linked with Lily. My children, dressed in new outfits I had never seen, barely glanced in my direction. My attorney Amanda nodded reassuringly as we took our places. My friend Sarah sat in the back of the courtroom, the only person there solely to support me. Mark had stayed away to avoid complicating the case, though I knew he was waiting anxiously for updates. The proceedings began with formal introductions and a summary of the case by the judge, a stern woman in her 60s who had, according to Amanda, a reputation for fairness, but little patience for dramatics. She reviewed the filed documents, her expression revealing nothing. Greg's attorney spoke first, painting a picture of me as a career-obsessed woman who had prioritized my nursing job and new relationship over my children's well-being. He described Greg and Tara as providing a stable, loving environment with consistent presence and support. He emphasized the children's stated preference to live with their father full-time. When it was Amanda's turn, she methodically presented evidence of my consistent involvement in the children's lives, despite working full-time to support them. She highlighted Greg's inconsistent financial contributions and pattern of scheduling conflicts designed to prevent me from attending important events. She requested that the court consider the possibility of parental alienation before making any custody modifications. After the attorney's statements, the judge called Lily forward to answer questions about her living situation and preferences. My 15-year-old daughter walked to the front of the courtroom with her shoulders back, confidence radiating from her posture. She had grown so much in the past year, looking more like a young woman than the child I still pictured when I thought of her. The judge asked her gentle but direct questions about her experiences in both households, her school performance, and her reasons for wanting to change the custody arrangement. Lily answered with rehearsed precision, describing life at Greg's house in glowing terms, while characterizing time at my apartment as tense and unwelcoming. Then came the moment that haunts my dreams and wakes me in cold sweat even now. Could you explain in your own words why you believe living with your father full-time would be better for you? The judge asked. Lily looked directly at me for the first time that day, her eyes hard with an emotion I couldn't identify. Because my mom doesn't care about us, she said, her voice rising with each word. She never has. She works all the time, and when she is home, she's with Mark. She misses everything important. My recitals, Jason's games, parent conferences. She screamed at my brother last month when he got sick in the middle of the night because she had to work the next day. That last part was a complete fabrication. I had never screamed at Jason for being ill. In fact, I had taken a personal day when he had the flu the previous winter to care for him. But before I could process this lie, Lily continued, her voice now almost shouting. You were never there for us, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. Dad's girlfriend is our real mom now. At least Tara shows up. At least she remembers what food we like and helps with homework and doesn't make us feel like burdens. The courtroom fell silent after her outburst. I couldn't breathe. Physical pain radiated from my chest as if Lily had actually stabbed me. Through my tears, I saw Jason looking down at his hands, his shoulders hunched. Greg was nodding slightly, a supportive expression carefully arranged on his face. The judge, to her credit, remained calm. She asked Lily if she had anything else to add, then gently dismissed her to sit back down. Then she looked at Amanda. "Does your client wish to question the minor?" she asked. I almost said no. The thought of interrogating my daughter, of pushing her further away by challenging her statements, was unbearable. But Amanda had prepared for this. She squeezed my hand under the table and stood. Briefly. "Your Honor," she said. With the judge's permission, Amanda approached Lily with several targeted questions about specific events over the past year. She established a pattern of Lily spending time with Greg during my court-allocated days. She confirmed that Greg frequently scheduled appealing activities that conflicted with my parenting time. Then she asked the critical question. "Lily, you mentioned that your mother missed important events. Did she miss your 14th birthday last year?" Lily nodded emphatically. "Yes, she had to work. She always has to work." Amanda turned to me and I handed her the photograph I'd selected the night before. She placed it on the table in front of Lily. "Is this your 14th birthday celebration?" she asked gently. The photograph showed me still in scrubs from my hospital shift exhaustion, evident in my posture, carrying a homemade strawberry cake to the table where Lily sat surrounded by friends. My hospital ID badge was visible, showing I had just completed a 16-hour shift, covering for a colleague whose father had died unexpectedly. Despite my exhaustion, my face in the photo showed nothing but love and pride. Lily stared at the photograph, her confident demeanor crumbling. I could see the exact moment recognition flickered in her eyes, followed by confusion, then the first hint of doubt. "I don't remember that," she whispered. "Dad said—" She stopped herself, but it was enough. The judge leaned forward, her interest piqued. "What did your father say?" she asked. Lily looked at Greg, then back at the photograph, then at me. Tears welled in her eyes again, but different from the angry tears before. "He said you chose an extra shift instead of my birthday," she said quietly. "He said you didn't even call." Amanda placed several more photographs on the table, one showing me at Jason's basketball game checking my watch because I was due at the hospital in 30 minutes, but determined to see him play. Another of me helping Lily with a science project at 2 in the morning after returning from a night shift. A third showing both children and me at the Natural History Museum on a day Greg had told them I had canceled our plans. The room was completely silent as Lily looked through these concrete pieces of evidence contradicting the narrative she'd been fed. Jason had moved closer now, peering at the photographs with growing confusion. The judge called for a 15-minute recess to allow everyone to collect themselves. As soon as she left the courtroom, Lily bolted for the door, Jason following close behind. A court officer found them in the hallway. Lily was hyperventilating, her panic attack in full swing as Jason tried helplessly to calm her. When the officer came to tell me, my nurse training immediately superseded everything else. I found my daughter curled against the wall, gasping for breath, her face pale and tear-streaked. I knelt beside her, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. "Breathe with me, Lily," I said gently, demonstrating the deep breathing pattern I'd taught countless panic-stricken patients. "In through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 7 out, through your mouth for 8. Instinct overrode her anger. She followed my breathing, her body remembering the technique I had taught her years ago when she had stage fright before a school play. Slowly her breathing normalized, though she kept her eyes averted from mine. Jason stood nearby, watching with that same conflicted expression I'd seen so many times over the past year. "Is it true?" he finally asked. "Did Dad lie about you missing all that stuff?" I reached for my portfolio and pulled out the family album I'd brought as evidence. For the next 10 minutes, as we sat in that hallway waiting for court to resume, I showed them page after page of documentation. Every school event, every doctor's appointment, every special occasion and ordinary moment I had prioritized despite exhaustion and financial strain. "Dad said you chose work and Mark over us." Jason said, his voice small. "He said you were glad when we started spending more time at his house." Lily had stopped crying and was looking through the album, pausing at a photo of us at the beach the summer before, a day I had specifically requested off 3 months in advance to accommodate her schedule. "Dad always planned really fun stuff during your weekends. she said slowly, as if putting pieces together. And if we chose to do his activities instead of coming to your apartment, he would buy us things or let us stay up late. Sometimes he'd text right before we were supposed to go to your place saying he'd bought concert tickets or arranged a sleepover with friends, Jason added. And he'd tell us not to tell you because you might try to stop us from having fun. They were beginning to see the pattern connecting dots that had been deliberately obscured by their father. Before we could discuss further, a woman approached and introduced herself as Dr. Elena Winters, the court-appointed psychologist assigned to evaluate our case. She spoke with the children briefly, then asked if she could join us when court resumed. Her presence turned out to be crucial, because when we returned to the courtroom and she shared her preliminary observations about the children's responses, she used a term that changed everything: parental alienation. The evidence strongly suggests a systematic campaign to damage the children's relationship with their mother, she stated. The contradictions between their stated perceptions and the documented reality indicate they have been manipulated into a false narrative about their mother's involvement and care. Greg couldn't contain himself. He stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "She's the one who chose her career over her family. She never wanted children in the first place. I was the one who wanted kids." This outburst, completely at odds with his previously calm demeanor, revealed a glimpse of the man I had learned to fear during our marriage. Tara looked shocked, shrinking away from him slightly. The judge banged her gavel, ordering Greg to sit down or be held in contempt. When he continued his tirade, suggesting the court was biased and threatening to appeal, she nodded to the bailiff. "Mr. Harrison, you will control yourself in my courtroom," she said firmly. After restoring order, the judge announced her temporary ruling. Our shared custody arrangement would continue with mandatory family counseling, and she was appointing Dr. Winters to conduct a full evaluation for parental alienation. She also ordered Greg to cease any behaviors that could be construed as interfering with my relationship with the children. As we prepared to leave the courtroom, a police officer approached our group. He had been providing security in the courtroom and had witnessed Greg's outburst. "Mom, I couldn't help overhearing some concerning statements," he said quietly. "The threats your ex-husband made under his breath after the judge's ruling constitute making terrorist threats against a family member. Would you like to file a report?" I looked at my children, who appeared shell-shocked by the day's revelations, and at Greg, who was still arguing with his attorney across the room. Mixed emotions flooded through me. Vindication that someone else had witnessed his true nature. Relief that the children had seen glimpses of reality, sadness at the confusion they must be experiencing. "Yes," I said finally. "I would like to file a report." As we left the courthouse, I spotted Mark waiting anxiously in his car across the street, maintaining a respectful distance as we'd agreed. Lily followed my gaze and surprisingly didn't roll her eyes or make a disparaging comment. It was a small thing, but in that moment, it felt enormous. The first family counseling session with Dr. Torres was painfully awkward. We sat in a comfortable office with soft lighting and neutral decor, 4 people connected by blood and history, but now strangers to each other. Lily perched on the edge of her chair, arms crossed defensively. Jason slouched beside her, eyes darting between all the adults. Greg had refused to attend, sending his attorney to contest the court-ordered therapy. For the first 30 minutes, the children barely spoke. Dr. Torres was patient, asking open-ended questions and allowing the silence to stretch without judgment. Finally, Jason broke first. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he admitted. "Dad says one thing, Mom says another." Dr. Torres nodded. "That's very common in situations like this. How does it make you feel to have different versions of reality from your parents?" "Like I can't trust anyone," Lily interjected suddenly. "Like everyone is just trying to use us to hurt the other person." Her insight surprised me. Despite everything, my daughter was perceptive and honest when given the space to be. Over the next hour, Dr. Torres guided us through an initial conversation about trust and perception. She didn't push Lily to acknowledge the manipulation she'd experienced, recognizing that such realizations needed to come gradually. Instead, she focused on establishing basic communication patterns that would allow us to rebuild. As we continued weekly sessions, layers of misunderstanding slowly began to peel away. Jason revealed smaller instances of manipulation that had occurred. He recalled how Greg would question him intensely after time with me, putting negative interpretations on neutral events. He remembered Greg saying, "I probably wouldn't come to his basketball championship," then acting surprised when I showed up, commenting that I must be feeling guilty for missing so many other games. I learned to express my struggles without burdening the children with adult problems. Instead of defending myself against every accusation, I focused on rebuilding trust through consistency and transparency. I shared my work schedule with them, explained the reasons behind my choices, and acknowledged when I had made mistakes. Greg continued to resist therapy, sending Tara in his place for the joint sessions required by the court. To everyone's surprise, including possibly her own, Tara began to distance herself from Greg's narrative as she observed our interactions. After one particularly productive session where Lily had opened up about feeling used in her parents' conflict, Tara approached me in the parking lot. "I think I might have been misled about some things," she said hesitantly. Greg can be very convincing when he tells his version of events. It was the closest thing to an apology I could expect, and I accepted it with a nod. Meanwhile, Greg's behavior grew increasingly erratic as he lost control of the narrative. He missed scheduled visits, then blamed me for miscommunication. He sent angry, rambling emails to Dr. Torres questioning her qualifications. The police investigation into his threatening statements resulted in a temporary restraining order after he showed up at my workplace demanding to speak with me. My supervisor, who had already adjusted my schedule to accommodate family therapy, continued to be my unexpected ally. She arranged my shifts to ensure I could be present for important school events and therapy appointments. For the first time in years, I felt supported in balancing my professional responsibilities with my children's needs. One Tuesday evening, after I had helped Lily with her biology homework, we had our first genuine conversation in years. She sat at the kitchen counter while I prepared dinner, nervously tracing patterns on the countertop with her finger. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "I'm sorry for what I said in court. I really believed." I put down the knife I was using to chop vegetables and gave her my full attention. "You believed what you were consistently told by someone you trusted?" I said gently. "That's not your fault, Lily." "But I should have known," she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "There were so many times when you were there and I just forgot or ignored it because Dad made it seem like those were exceptions." I moved around the counter and sat beside her, not touching her yet, respecting her space. "The human mind is fascinating," I said. "When someone you love and trust tells you something repeatedly, especially starting from when you're young, it becomes your reality. That's not weakness. It's how our brains are wired." She leaned against me, then tentatively at first, then relaxing into the kind of hug I hadn't felt from her in years. Jason took longer to fully open up, but he developed a protective attitude toward both his sister and me. He started intervening when Greg would make undermining comments during phone calls, sometimes hanging up and texting me immediately to report what had happened. The breakthrough came 2 months after the court hearing, when Lily discovered old text messages Greg had asked her to delete. She'd been using an old phone as a music player after her new one had been damaged, and the messages were still in the archive. Seeing the manipulation in black and white, the deliberate scheduling conflicts, the coaching on what to tell counselors about me, it was irrefutable evidence of what she'd experienced. She brought the phone to Dr. Torres, who helped her process the discovery without demonizing her father. This was critical to me. I never wanted the children to hate Greg, despite my anger at his actions. Dr. Torres skillfully helped them understand that people are complex, that their father loved them, but had made harmful choices driven by his own issues. With the children's permission, Dr. Torres shared the text messages with the court. The judge modified our custody order, requiring Greg's parenting time to be supervised temporarily and mandating individual therapy for him before resumption of normal visitation. Mark gradually re-entered our family life, this time invited by the children themselves. Jason asked if Mark would help coach his basketball team, which needed assistant coaches. Lily, discovering Mark's interest in photography, asked him to help with her visual arts project. These small connections, initiated by the children without pressure, laid the groundwork for a healthier blended family than I had dared to hope for. The atmosphere in our apartment transformed gradually from tense silence to cautious warmth. We established new traditions like Sunday morning pancakes with each person choosing their own toppings, and Thursday game nights where electronics were banned in favor of board games and conversation. 3 months after the court hearing, Lily asked me to help her with college application research, something she'd previously insisted Tara would handle. We spent a Saturday visiting 2 local universities, talking about her interests and potential majors. In the car on the way home, she confessed she'd been afraid to show academic ambition around Greg, who frequently dismissed college as unnecessary for girls who would eventually become mothers. That same week, Jason invited me to his basketball game for the first time in over a year. Sitting in the bleachers cheering as he made a 3-pointer in the final quarter, I felt a piece of my broken heart begin to heal. Even as our relationship improved, Greg continued attempting to regain control. He sent expensive gifts, made promises about future trips and experiences, and occasionally tried to schedule activities during my parenting time. But the children, now aware of the pattern, were less susceptible to these tactics. They didn't reject their father entirely, but they began setting boundaries and recognizing manipulation when it occurred. One evening, we made tacos together in our small kitchen, the children arguing good-naturedly about the proper ratio of cheese to salsa. As we sat down to eat, Jason paused and looked around the table. "This is nice," he said simply. "Just being normal." Lily nodded in agreement. "Yeah, no drama, no pressure, just family. Family. Despite everything, despite the court battles and manipulation and heartbreak, we were still a family. Different than before, wounded, but healing, finding our way back to each other, one taco dinner at a time." 6 months after that fateful day in court, our lives had transformed in ways I could never have predicted. The judge had granted me primary custody following Dr. Winter's comprehensive evaluation, which confirmed the parental alienation that had damaged our family. Greg now had structured visitation contingent on his continued participation in therapy, addressing his manipulative behaviors. Lily, now 16, had grown into her role as the mature young woman she had always been beneath the anger and confusion. One evening, as we washed dishes together, a chore she had once refused to help with, she turned to me with unexpected tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry for what I said in the courtroom, Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't believe I screamed those things at you. That I believed them." I put down the plate I was drying and turned to fully face her. "You were manipulated by someone you trusted implicitly," I said gently. "There's nothing to forgive." She shook her head stubbornly. "No, there is. Because even with all Dad's manipulation, there were moments when I knew the truth. When I saw how exhausted you were from working to support us. When you showed up to events even though I pretended not to see you. I chose to believe the easier story." Her self-awareness amazed me. At 16, she understood nuances of human psychology that many adults never grasp. "That's part of growing up," Lily, I replied. "Learning to see the complex truth instead of the simple story." I'm just grateful we found our way back to each other. With my improved financial situation now that I had been promoted to charge nurse, we moved to a slightly larger apartment in the same school district. The children each had their own bedroom, and we converted the small dining area into a shared study space. It wasn't extravagant, but it was home filled with photographs and art projects and the accumulated evidence of a family rebuilding itself. Jason, at 14, was still navigating the complex emotional landscape of adolescence, but he had opened up about the pressure he'd felt to support his sister and father during the worst of the alienation. "I knew something was wrong," he confessed during one of our now regular evening walks around the neighborhood. "But Dad said I had to protect Lily from you, that she was more fragile and needed me to back her up. That must have been an impossible position for you," I said, my heart aching for the burden he'd carried. He shrugged in that distinctly teenage way. "Yeah, but I'm good now. Dr. Torres says I have good boundaries for my age." I smiled at his casual reference to therapy concepts. Both children had continued their sessions with Dr. Torres, finding value in the neutral space to process their experiences. My relationship with the children's school had required deliberate repair. I scheduled a meeting with the counselor who had written the damaging letter based solely on Greg's narrative. Rather than approaching with anger, I brought documentation of my consistent involvement and requested a fresh start. She was appropriately professional, though I detected embarrassment in her carefully neutral expression. More importantly, she became an ally in monitoring the children's emotional well-being at school. Mark had gradually become a welcome presence in our home again, this time with the children's explicit approval. He maintained appropriate boundaries, never attempting to replace their father, but offering the kind of steady, positive male influence that growing teenagers benefit from. To my surprise, it was Lily who first invited him to join a family movie night, saving a spot for him on the couch beside me. My relationship with Greg remained strictly parallel parenting rather than co-parenting with minimal direct interaction. During exchanges, I remained cordial but firm, documenting every interaction in the journal I still maintained out of habit rather than necessity. The police investigation had resulted in a permanent restraining order after Greg violated the temporary one, meaning all communication had to occur through a court-approved parenting app. In an unexpected turn, Tara reached out to me directly, requesting a coffee meeting without Greg or the children. At a neutral cafe halfway between our homes, she offered a genuine apology. I didn't understand what I was participating in, she said, staring into her latte. I thought I was supporting my husband and helping children who needed a mother figure. I never intended to replace you or damage your relationship with them. Her sincerity seemed genuine, and I found myself believing her. Greg had manipulated her too, in different but equally damaging ways. What made you start questioning things? I asked. She sighed, twisting her wedding ring thoughtfully. It was little things at first. Inconsistencies in Greg's stories. The way he would tell the kids one thing in front of me, then something completely different when he thought I couldn't hear. But the courtroom was the real wake-up call. Seeing those photographs, watching his reaction, I suddenly saw a side of him I hadn't allowed myself to notice before. Our conversation gave me unexpected closure. Tara wasn't the villain it painted her to be in my darkest moments, just another person caught in Greg's web of manipulation. We would never be friends, but we could be allies in supporting the children through their ongoing relationship with their father. As I reflected on our journey over those 6 months, I realized how crucial my documentation had been. Those photographs, text messages, and journal entries had literally saved my relationship with my children. The family album that had once seemed like a sentimental project had become the tangible evidence we needed when everything else was obscured by manipulation. The most profound change came at Lily's high school graduation ceremony. Sitting in the auditorium watching my daughter walk across the stage to receive her diploma, I couldn't help contrasting this moment with that devastating day in the courtroom a year earlier. Then she'd been convinced I didn't care about her accomplishments. Now she'd asked me to help her prepare her application essays, to take her shopping for a graduation dress, to be the first person to see her acceptance letters. After the ceremony, as we gathered for photographs, Lily insisted on a picture with just the two of us. As we stood together, her arm around my waist, I saw in her eyes the daughter I'd feared I'd lost forever. "I understand now why you worked so hard," she whispered, "why you pushed yourself beyond exhaustion. It was always for us, wasn't it?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. For years I had believed that truth would eventually prevail, that my children would somehow see through the manipulation and recognize my love for them. During the darkest periods that faith had wavered, but standing there with my daughter, I knew with certainty that truth doesn't always win immediately, but it endures longer than any lie. My professional life had also evolved. While I still worked as a nurse, I had adjusted my schedule to create better balance. I had become something of an informal resource for colleagues experiencing similar custody challenges, sharing what I'd learned about documentation and navigating family court. One of the doctors I'd worked with for years encouraged me to speak at a conference about parental alienation from a healthcare provider's perspective, sharing my insights about how medical professionals can support patients experiencing family trauma. Our healing remained ongoing. There were still difficult days, moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge, especially after the children returned from time with Greg. But the foundation we'd rebuilt was solid. We had developed tools for communication, boundaries for protecting our relationships, and most importantly, a shared commitment to honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. 2 weeks before Jason's 15th birthday, we hung a new family photograph in our living room. Mark had taken it during a weekend hike, capturing the three of us laughing together on a sunny trail. I placed it beside the court evidence photograph of me and Scrubs at Lily's birthday. Those images told the story of our journey, the contrast between them more powerful than words could express. That evening, as the children worked on homework and I prepared dinner, I reflected on the wisdom I'd gained through our ordeal. I had learned the vital importance of documenting your own story when others are working to rewrite it. I'd learned that children can be manipulated but are ultimately resilient and capable of recognizing truth when given the opportunity. I'd learned that healing isn't linear, that reconciliation comes in fits and starts in small moments of connection rather than dramatic revelations. Most importantly, I'd learned that love persists even when buried under layers of manipulation and misunderstanding. It remains patient and enduring, waiting for the moment when truth finally breaks through. Has your family ever experienced something like this? The power of documentation and evidence in revealing truth that others tried to hide. I hope my story gives you strength if you're fighting your own battle for your children or relationships. Let me know in the comments what resonated with you, and please subscribe if you found value in my journey. Remember that sometimes the quietest evidence speaks louder than years of accusations. Thank you for listening, and I wish you healing in whatever struggles you're facing.